My parents thought they could steal my baby from me. The baby monitor crackled to life at 2:47 a.m., but it wasn't Emma's crying that made my blood run cold. It was my mother's voice, crystal clear through the static, talking to my father in the nursery I'd set up in their guest room during our temporary stay. The lawyer said we need documentation of everything, Richard. Every time she's late with a feeding, every time she seems overwhelmed, every tear she sheds. It all builds the case that she's unfit. I pressed my back against the hallway wall, my heart hammering so hard I was sure they'd hear it. 3 weeks. I'd been living here for 3 weeks since Emma was born, thinking my parents were being supportive while I got back on my feet. Thinking they actually wanted to help their struggling daughter. Linda, keep your voice down, my father whispered, but not nearly quiet enough. What did Harrison say about the depression angle? He said it's perfect. The postpartum depression combined with her history from college, plus the fact that she's broke and living with us, it paints a clear picture of someone who can't provide stability. My hands started shaking. Harrison Blackwell was their country club friend, some hotshot family attorney who'd handled their estate planning. They'd been consulting with him. About me. About my baby. I still think we should give her more time, Dad said, and for a split second, hope fluttered in my chest. Time for what? To move into some rat-infested apartment she can't afford? To feed our granddaughter formula because she's too stressed to breastfeed properly? Richard, look at her. She's exactly like she was at 20 when she had that breakdown. Some people just aren't meant to be parents. The hope died instantly, replaced by a rage so pure it actually steadied my hands. I pulled out my phone and started recording. We're not stealing anything, Mom continued. We're saving that precious baby from a lifetime of instability. Emma deserves better than a mother who cries herself to sleep every night and can't even afford diapers without our help. The CPS call is scheduled for Thursday, Dad said quietly. You're sure about the story? I've been documenting everything like Harrison suggested. The time she's left Emma crying while she showered. The day she forgot to burp her and Emma spit up everywhere. How she sometimes just stares at the wall for minutes at a time. It's not fabrication, Richard, it's concern from loving grandparents. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Left Emma crying while I showered? I'd been in there for exactly 4 minutes, and they told me they were watching her. The burping incident happened once, on day 2, when I was still learning. And staring at walls? I was exhausted, not catatonic. Once CPS opens a case and sees she's living here with no job, no prospects, and a history of mental health issues. Mom's voice took on that satisfied tone I remembered from childhood, when she'd successfully orchestrated some social coup. Harrison says we'll be the obvious choice for emergency custody. Stable income, established home, proven track record raising a child. My phone showed 3:23 of recording time. 3 minutes and 23 seconds of evidence that my parents, the people who'd raised me, who I'd trusted with my most vulnerable moments, were plotting to steal my daughter. Emma started crying then, really crying, and I heard them both moving around the nursery. In 30 seconds, they'd come out and find me in the hallway, and I'd have to pretend I'd just woken up to help with the baby. I had less than 2 days before their CPS call. Time to remind them exactly how strong their broken daughter really was. I slipped back to my room with Emma's cries covering my footsteps, my mind racing faster than my heart. Thursday. That gave me exactly 36 hours to figure out how to protect my daughter from the people who were supposed to protect us both. Emma settled against my chest as I fed her, her tiny fingers curling around mine with complete trust. 3 weeks old and already the center of a war she didn't even know was being fought. I studied her perfect face in the dim light from my phone screen, still open to the voice recording that would either save us or destroy what was left of my family. It's going to be okay, baby girl, I whispered, but my voice cracked on the promise. The next morning arrived with a kind of artificial normalcy that made my skin crawl. Mom bustled around making her famous blueberry pancakes, humming while she cooked like she hadn't spent last night plotting to rip my child away from me. Dad sat at the kitchen table reading the Tribune, occasionally making grandfather noises at Emma in her bouncy seat. You look tired, sweetheart, Mom said, sliding a plate in front of me. The endearment felt like acid. Why don't you go take a nice long shower after breakfast? Dad and I will watch Emma. Of course they would. More documentation opportunities. Actually, I have some errands to run today, I said, cutting into the pancakes I couldn't taste. Job interviews. It wasn't entirely a lie. I did have one interview lined up for next week at a marketing firm downtown, but today's mission was far more critical. Dad looked up from his paper. Oh? Where at? Just some local businesses. Nothing concrete yet. I kept my voice light, casual. I should probably start looking at apartments too. I know you two are ready to get your guest room back. The look that passed between them lasted exactly 2 seconds, but it spoke volumes. Panic. This wasn't part of their timeline. Honey, there's no rush, Mom said quickly. You and Emma are welcome here as long as you need. We love having you both. Lies wrapped in maternal concern. I smiled and nodded, playing the grateful daughter while mentally cataloging every word for the battle ahead. By 9 a.m., I was driving toward downtown with Emma sleeping in her car seat, the recording burning like evidence in my phone. My first stop was the law library at Northwestern, where I'd spent countless hours during my journalism degree researching stories that seemed insignificant compared to this. 4 hours later, I understood exactly what I was up against. Illinois custody law favored biological parents, but exceptions existed for cases involving mental health issues, financial instability, and child endangerment. Harrison Blackwell wasn't just some country club lawyer, he was one of the most successful family attorneys in the state, with a reputation for winning cases other lawyers wouldn't touch. But he'd also never faced someone who'd spent 4 years learning to dig up dirt and build airtight cases out of scattered evidence. Journalism school hadn't just taught me to write, it had taught me to investigate, to verify, and to never trust anyone's version of events without proof. I had 30 hours left, and I was going to use every single one. Emma stirred as I carried her car seat into the coffee shop across from Blackwell's law office. Time to learn exactly what my parents had told their attorney, and more importantly, what they hadn't told him about the daughter they thought they knew so well. The barista at Grind Coffee looked like she was barely out of high school, all purple hair and facial piercings that would have sent my mother into cardiac arrest. Perfect. Excuse me, I said, approaching with Emma's carrier and my most harmless smile. I know this is weird, but I'm trying to surprise my husband for our anniversary. He works across the street at Blackwell and Associates? I was wondering if you might know what time he usually comes in for coffee. She glanced toward the law office windows. Oh, the fancy lawyer dudes? Yeah, there's this older guy, super uptight, comes in every day at 2:15 exactly. Orders a large black coffee and always complains that we're too slow. Harrison Blackwell. Had to be. That's him. I laughed, bouncing Emma's carrier slightly. Always complaining about something. Right? And he's always on his phone talking about really intense stuff. Like, yesterday he was going on about some custody case, how the grandmother was building documentation or whatever. Dude needs to learn about inside voices. My blood chilled. Really? That's so like him, bringing work everywhere. Yeah, he was telling whoever that they needed to be more careful about their evidence gathering because the mother was sharper than they initially assessed. She rolled her eyes. Rich people problems, you know? Sharper than they initially assessed. Harrison had figured out I wasn't the broken mess my parents had described. But what had tipped him off? I thanked the barista and settled at a corner table with a clear view of the law office entrance, my mind racing. If Harrison suspected I was onto them, he might have advised my parents to accelerate their timeline. The CPS call could be happening sooner than Thursday. Emma fussed softly, and I lifted her from the carrier to feed her, using the motion as cover to scroll through my contacts. Jake Morrison had been my investigative journalism professor and the closest thing I'd had to a mentor before depression derailed my senior year. If anyone could help me navigate this legal minefield, it would be him. He answered on the second ring. Sarah Chen. Christ, it's been what, 2 years? How are you, kid? I've been better, Jake. I need help, and I need it fast. I gave him the abbreviated version, new baby, custody threat, recorded evidence, 30-hour timeline. The silence stretched long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Jake? I'm here. Just trying to process the fact that your own parents are pulling this. You said Harrison Blackwell? He's a shark, Sarah. But he's also got an ego the size of Chicago. If we play this right. Another pause. How's your investigative skills these days? Rusty but functional. Why? Because Blackwell's firm has been under investigation by the state bar for the last 6 months. Ethics violations, coaching clients to fabricate evidence. Nothing stuck yet, but if your parents are working with him to build a false narrative. My heart started hammering. You think he'd risk his license for a custody case? For the right client with the right money? Absolutely. Your parents have money, right? I thought about their country club memberships, the yearly European vacations, Dad's BMW collection. Yeah. They have money. Then he's probably charging them a fortune and telling them whatever they want to hear. The question is, can you prove they're fabricating evidence, or just collecting it? Through the coffee shop window, I watched a man in an expensive suit emerge from the Blackwell building. Tall, silver-haired, walking with the kind of confidence that came from never losing. Harrison Blackwell, exactly at 2:15. Jake, I said slowly, what if I could get him on recording discussing falsified evidence? Then your parents wouldn't be the only ones facing consequences. But Sarah, that's incredibly dangerous. If you get caught. Then I lose Emma anyway. I watched Harrison cross the street toward the coffee shop, already pulling out his phone. I have to go. I'll call you back. 29 hours and counting. Harrison Blackwell ordered his black coffee exactly as the barista had predicted, then settled 2 tables away from me. I angled myself so Emma's carrier blocked his view of my face, praying he wouldn't recognize me from any photos my parents might have shown him. His phone rang within 30 seconds. Harrison Blackwell. His voice carried that particular brand of arrogance that came with charging $800 an hour. Linda, I told you not to call me during business hours unless it's urgent. My mother. I fumbled for my phone's recording app, hands shaking as I hit record. Slow down, Harrison said, his tone shifting to annoyance. What do you mean she was asking questions about apartments? I thought you said she was completely dependent on you. A pause while my mother spoke. Emma started fussing, and I bounced her carrier gently, terrified any sound would give me away. No, Linda, that's exactly the kind of development that could undermine our entire strategy. If she finds stable housing and employment before we file. He rubbed his temples. We may need to move faster than Thursday. My blood turned to ice water. Here's what we're going to do. I want you to document everything she does today. If she leaves the house, where does she go? If she makes phone calls, can you check her phone? We need something concrete, something that shows clear neglect or instability. He paused, listening, then laughed, a sound like glass breaking. Of course it's legal, Linda. You're concerned grandparents documenting legitimate safety issues. The fact that she's living in your home gives you every right to monitor concerning behavior. Another pause. What do you mean? What if the recordings don't show what we need them to show? My heart stopped beating entirely. Linda, we've discussed this. Sometimes the most important evidence is what happens when no one else is around to witness it. Do you understand what I'm telling you? He was coaching her to lie. Not just collect evidence, create it. Good. And remember, if Child Protective Services asks about specific incidents, you need to be able to provide dates, times, details. The more specific you are about her failures as a mother, the more credible your concern appears. Emma let out a small cry, and Harrison glanced toward our table. I turned away quickly, making soft shushing sounds while my pulse hammered in my throat. I have to go, Harrison said into the phone. But Linda? Make a call tomorrow instead of Thursday. Wednesday morning, first thing. We can't risk her getting too stable before we establish the case. Tomorrow. They were moving the timeline up by 24 hours. I waited until Harrison left the coffee shop before allowing myself to breathe again. 12 minutes and 37 seconds of recorded conversation. A lawyer instructing a client to fabricate evidence and file false reports with Child Protective Services. Jake had been right about Harrison's ego. The man was so confident in his untouchability that he discussed witness coaching in a public place. But knowing I had evidence and being able to use it were 2 different things entirely. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. How did the job interviews go, sweetheart? Dad's making your favorite dinner tonight. The artificial sweetness made me sick. While she was texting about dinner, she was planning to call CPS in 18 hours with fabricated stories about my failures as a mother. I strapped Emma back into her car seat, my hands steadier now than they'd been all day. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by something harder and more focused. My parents had made a critical mistake. They'd assumed I was still the broken 20-year-old who'd crumbled under pressure. But I wasn't 20 anymore. I was a mother with everything to lose and nothing left to fear from the people who'd already decided to destroy me. Time to show them exactly who they were trying to steal from. The drive back to my parents' house felt like approaching enemy territory. Every familiar landmark, the corner market where Dad used to buy me candy, the park where Mom taught me to ride a bike, now seemed tainted by the knowledge of what they were planning. I had 17 hours before my mother would call CPS with her carefully crafted lies. Emma slept peacefully in her car seat, oblivious to the fact that tomorrow morning, strangers would arrive to evaluate whether she was safe with me. Whether the recordings I'd captured would be enough to stop what was coming. Sarah, honey. Mom called as I walked through the front door. Perfect timing. I just put Emma's favorite blanket in the dryer, and I made that chamomile tea you like. The performance was flawless. Concerned grandmother, caring mother, devoted to our well-being. If I hadn't heard her voice through the baby monitor 2 nights ago, I might have believed it myself. Thanks, Mom. The interviews went well, I think. I settled Emma into her bouncy seat, watching my parents' reactions carefully. One of them might even lead to something quick. The manager said they could have me start as early as next week if the references check out. Dad looked up from his newspaper. References? I hope you put us down. We'd be happy to vouch for your character. The irony was suffocating. Actually, I used Professor Morrison and a few others from Northwestern. You know, professional references. Something flickered in Mom's eyes. Fear? Calculation? Jake Morrison? Your journalism professor? I thought you'd lost touch with him. We reconnected today, actually. He's been really helpful with job search advice. I kept my voice casual while watching her process this information. He even offered to review my resume, make sure it highlights the right skills. Mom and Dad exchanged another look, the kind of silent communication that comes from 30 years of marriage and 3 days of conspiracy planning. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Mom said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Though I hope you're not putting too much pressure on yourself. You know, with everything you've been through lately. There it was. The gentle reminder of my supposed fragility, the subtle undermining disguised as concern. Every word carefully chosen to reinforce their narrative of my incompetence. I feel great, actually. Better than I have in months. I lifted Emma from her seat, holding her close. There's something about being her mom that just clarifies everything, you know? Makes me stronger. Of course, dear. Mom's voice had that brittle quality I remembered from childhood arguments. Though we've noticed you seem tired lately. Maybe even a little overwhelmed? She was fishing, looking for admissions she could use. Had Harrison told her to gather more evidence after their phone call this afternoon? Just normal new mom stuff. Nothing I can't handle. I kissed Emma's forehead, breathing in her sweet baby scent. Tomorrow, if their plan worked, I might not be allowed to hold her like this. Well, Dad said, folding his newspaper with deliberate precision, we want you to know that whatever happens, we're here for you. And for Emma. We'd do anything to make sure she's safe and provided for. The thread was crystal clear, wrapped in grandfatherly devotion. We're taking her, and we'll paint it as rescue. I know you would, Dad. Family is everything, right? I excused myself to put Emma down for her nap, climbing the stairs to the guest room with my heart pounding. Once the door was closed, I pulled out my phone and called Jake. Any luck with your afternoon reconnaissance mission? He asked without preamble. Better than I hoped. Harrison's coaching her to fabricate evidence. I got it recorded. I played him the key portions of the coffee shop conversation. When it finished, Jake whistled low. Holy shit, Sarah. This is bigger than just custody fraud. If we can prove a pattern of this behavior. What do you mean? I mean Harrison Blackwell might have just handed you the nuclear option. But we need more than one recording. We need to show this isn't isolated to your case. I sank onto the bed, exhaustion hitting me like a wave. Jake, they're calling CPS tomorrow morning instead of Thursday. I don't have time to build a federal case. Then we make time. I'm driving up from Champaign tonight. We're going to need help, and I know exactly who to call. Who? Rebecca Torres. Remember her? She was a year behind you, worked on the campus investigation that got the dean fired. She's a social worker now, specializes in custody cases. If anyone knows how to navigate a false CPS report, it's her. Rebecca Torres. I remembered her vaguely, driven, uncompromising, the kind of person who'd chosen social work because she actually wanted to protect people. Jake, I can't drag other people into this mess. Kid, you're not dragging anyone. We're volunteering. Besides, his voice turned grim, if Blackwell's been coaching clients to fabricate evidence in custody cases, there are probably other families he's destroyed. Other kids who got placed with the wrong people because of his lies. Through the baby monitor, I could hear my parents talking quietly in the kitchen. Planning tomorrow's performance, probably. Rehearsing their concern, their reluctant but necessary intervention. Okay, I said quietly. What do we do? First, we document everything. Every conversation, every interaction. Second, we contact the state bar tonight, emergency ethics violation. Third, we make sure when CPS shows up tomorrow, they're walking into a trap instead of setting one. Emma stirred in her crib, making soft baby sounds in her sleep. 17 hours until my parents tried to steal her. But for the first time since this started, I wasn't facing it alone. The war for my daughter was about to begin. The guest room felt like a prison cell as I waited for Jake's arrival. Emma had been down for 2 hours, and the house had settled into that deceptive evening quiet that made my parents' voices carry perfectly through the thin walls. I still think we should wait until Thursday, Dad was saying in the kitchen below. Rushing feels suspicious. Harrison knows what he's doing, Richard. Besides, she's getting too comfortable, talking about jobs and references. What if that journalism professor starts asking questions? My blood chilled. They were worried about Jake. Which meant they knew exactly how dangerous he could be to their plans. Speaking of questions, Mom continued, I checked her phone while she was feeding Emma this afternoon. She's been researching custody law, Richard. She knows something. The room spun. She'd gone through my phone? I grabbed it off the nightstand, scrolling frantically through my browser history. Everything was still there, the legal research, the searches about Harrison's firm, even the screenshots I'd taken of Illinois CPS procedures. I was such an idiot. Of course they'd check my phone. They'd been monitoring everything else. A text from Jake appeared, 20 minutes out. Rebecca's with me. Whatever you do, don't let them know we're coming. Too late. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Mom's cell, even though she was literally one floor below me. Sarah, sweetie? Could you come downstairs? Dad and I want to talk to you about something. My hand started shaking. Can't it wait? Emma just went down and I'm exhausted. It's important, honey. It's about your future. About Emma's future. The confrontation was happening tonight instead of tomorrow morning. They'd moved up their entire timeline. I crept to the guest room window overlooking the driveway. Dad's BMW was parked directly behind my Honda Civic. Even if Jake arrived, even if I wanted to run, they'd blocked me in. Sarah? Mom's voice carried a sharper edge now. We're waiting. I kissed Emma's sleeping forehead and whispered, Mommy's going to fix this, baby girl. I promise. The living room felt like a tribunal. Mom and Dad sat on the couch, a manila folder spread open between them. Even from across the room, I could see Harrison Blackwell's letterhead on several documents. Sit down, sweetheart. Mom patted the armchair across from them, the same spot where they used to lecture me about grades in high school. We need to discuss some concerns we have. I remained standing. What kind of concerns? Dad cleared his throat. We know you've been researching legal issues, Sarah. We know you've been making calls to your old professors. I'm job hunting. Of course I'm making calls. Are you? Mom's voice turned ice cold. Because Harrison ran a background check on Jake Morrison today. Did you know he's been investigating family court corruption for the Tribune? That he's specifically been looking into cases involving fabricated evidence? My heart stopped. Jake hadn't mentioned he was actively investigating this stuff. Which meant. You called him about us, didn't you? Dad's disappointed tone was worse than anger. You think we're trying to hurt you. I think you're trying to steal my baby. The words came out stronger than I felt. Mom's mask finally slipped completely. Steal? Sarah, we're trying to save her. From a mother who's so paranoid she thinks her own parents are the enemy. She reached into the manila folder and pulled out a printed page. Custody petition, already filed with Cook County Family Court. Emergency hearing scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. The world tilted sideways. You already filed? The CPS call was just theater, Dad said quietly. Harrison advised us that a direct custody challenge would be faster and cleaner. Especially with the evidence we've gathered. Mom spread out printed screenshots across the coffee table. My browser history. My call log. Photos of me crying while holding Emma, taken through the guest room window. A detailed timeline of every moment they deemed me unstable over the past 3 weeks. Postpartum depression, financial instability, paranoid delusions about family members, Mom recited like she was reading a grocery list. Harrison says the judge will have no choice but to award us emergency custody while you get the help you obviously need. Car headlights swept across the front window. Jake and Rebecca, arriving exactly when everything was falling apart. Expecting someone? Dad asked, following my gaze. The doorbell rang before I could answer. Mom smiled with cold satisfaction. Actually, we are. Harrison thought it would be helpful to have a neutral witness document your reaction when we served you the custody papers. He's bringing a court officer to ensure everything's handled properly. But it wasn't Harrison at the door. It was Jake Morrison, Rebecca Torres, and someone in an official-looking uniform who definitely wasn't working for my parents' lawyer. Good evening, the uniformed woman said when Dad opened the door. I'm Deputy Marshal Kim Patterson. We're here to serve some papers of our own. Through the doorway, I could see Jake's grim smile. Sarah, meet the state bar investigator who's been building a case against Harrison Blackwell for the last 8 months. Turns out your recording this afternoon was exactly the evidence they needed. The manila folder slipped from Mom's hands, custody documents scattering across the hardwood floor. The trap my parents thought they'd set had just snapped shut on them instead. The next 2 hours unfolded like a fever dream. Deputy Marshal Patterson served Harrison Blackwell with ethics violation charges while Jake documented everything on his phone. Rebecca Torres, who turned out to be not just a social worker but a licensed child welfare investigator, took one look at my parents' evidence folder and started making calls to Cook County Family Court. This custody petition is fraudulent, she announced, flipping through Harrison's filing. Half these timestamps don't match the photo metadata, and several of these concerning incidents happened on days when your parents weren't even home to witness them. Mom had gone completely silent, sitting rigid on the couch like a statue. Dad kept running his hands through his hair, muttering about misunderstandings and taken out of context. There's no misunderstanding Richard's voice on this recording, Jake said, playing back the coffee shop conversation for Deputy Patterson. Harrison Blackwell explicitly coached your wife to fabricate evidence for a custody case. We never fabricated anything. Mom finally exploded. Everything in that folder is true. Sarah is unstable, she has no money, no job, no prospects. Emma deserves better. Emma deserves her mother, Rebecca said calmly. And her mother deserves not to be framed by her own parents. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, emergency custody hearing cancelled by court order. Blackwell suspended pending investigation. You're safe. Deputy Patterson. Safe. The word felt foreign after 3 weeks of walking on eggshells in my childhood home. Sarah. Dad's voice cracked as he looked at me across the wreckage of scattered legal documents. We were trying to help. You have to believe that. When you moved back here, you were so fragile, so overwhelmed. So you decided I was unfit without even giving me a chance to prove otherwise? You had your chance. Mom shot back, her composure completely shattered now. 22 years of chances. The depression in college, dropping out of internships, never finishing anything you started. Did you really think a baby would magically fix all of that? The words hit like physical blows, each one a carefully aimed strike at my deepest insecurities. But for the first time, they didn't land the way she intended. You're right, I said quietly. I've struggled. I've failed at things. But Emma didn't fix me, Mom. She motivated me to fix myself. There's a difference. Rebecca was photographing the scattered documents with her phone, building what Jake called a counter-narrative for the state bar investigation. Sarah, I need to ask, do you have somewhere else to stay tonight? Given the circumstances, remaining in this house might not be advisable. The reality hit me like ice water. I had no job, $347 in my checking account, and a 3-week-old baby who needed stability. My parents' house was toxic, but it was also the only roof I had. She has nowhere to go, Mom said with bitter satisfaction. That's exactly the problem. What kind of mother puts her infant daughter in this situation? The kind who fights for her child instead of surrendering her, Jake said firmly. Sarah, you can stay with me tonight. Rebecca knows emergency housing resources for tomorrow. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. His professorial authority cut through my protests. Besides, we have work to do. Harrison's ethics hearing is in 72 hours, and your testimony is going to be crucial evidence. Mom laughed, a harsh sound like breaking glass. Testimony? You think anyone will believe her over a respected attorney and 2 upstanding grandparents concerned about their daughter's mental health? Actually, yes. Deputy Patterson looked up from her notes. Especially when that respected attorney is facing federal charges for witness coaching in 6 other custody cases we've identified. Your daughter's recording was the final piece of a much larger puzzle. The color drained from Dad's face. 6 other cases? 6 other families destroyed by fabricated evidence. 6 other children placed in custody situations that served adults' interests instead of their well-being. Rebecca's voice carried professional disgust. Sarah's not your first victim. She's just the first one who fought back effectively. I looked around the living room where I'd grown up, at parents who'd raised me but never really known me, at the remnants of a custody case built on lies and manipulation. 3 weeks ago, I'd moved back here thinking I was coming home. Now I understood I was finally leaving it. I need to pack Emma's things, I said. The silence that followed my announcement felt like the eye of a hurricane. I turned toward the stairs to pack Emma's things, but Mom's voice stopped me cold. You're making a mistake, Sarah. A mistake that will haunt you for the rest of your life. I paused on the bottom step. The only mistake I made was trusting you. No. She stood up slowly, and something in her posture made my skin crawl. Your mistake was thinking this was over. Jake frowned. What's that supposed to mean, Linda? Mom walked to the front window, her movements deliberate and unsettling. Deputy Patterson, you said Harrison's facing charges in 6 other cases? That's correct. And those cases will require extensive investigation? Testimony from multiple witnesses? Media attention? Mom's voice carried a strange, satisfied edge that made my stomach drop. Probably, yes. What's your point? Mom turned back to us with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. My point is that Sarah's about to become the star witness in a very public legal scandal. Her face will be in newspapers. Her name will be associated with custody fraud, family dysfunction, mental health issues. She paused, letting the implications sink in. What employer is going to hire someone with that kind of baggage? What landlord will rent to her? The room went dead quiet. She was right, and everyone knew it. You think you've won, Mom continued, addressing me directly now. But you've just made yourself unemployable. Unmarketable. Who's going to want to get involved with a girl whose own parents tried to take her baby? What does that say about you as a person? Dad shifted uncomfortably. Linda, that's enough. Is it, Richard? Because I think our daughter needs to understand the full consequences of her choices. She stepped closer to me. You can leave tonight, Sarah. You can play the victim, testify against Harrison, destroy our family publicly. But 6 months from now, when you're living in some subsidized housing project and Emma's daycare is raising her because you're working 3 minimum wage jobs just to survive, remember this moment. Remember that you chose pride over practicality. The manipulation was so smooth, so perfectly crafted, that for a split second I almost believed her. Almost let the old familiar shame creep back in. Then Emma started crying upstairs, and the sound cut through my mother's psychological warfare like a knife. You know what, Mom? You're absolutely right about one thing. This is going to be hard. Probably the hardest thing I've ever done. I met her eyes steadily. But I'd rather struggle as Emma's mother than succeed as your victim. Rebecca was watching this exchange with the clinical interest of someone who'd seen family dysfunction professionally. Mrs. Chen, are you seriously trying to coerce your daughter into dropping charges by threatening her economic future? I'm trying to make her see reason. No, Jake said quietly, his phone still recording everything. You're doing exactly what Harrison coached you to do. Using fear and manipulation to control the narrative. He looked at me. Sarah, go get Emma. We're leaving now. But as I climbed the stairs, Mom's words followed me. She wasn't wrong about the challenges ahead. Being the public face of a custody fraud scandal wouldn't exactly enhance my resume. The legal proceedings could drag on for months, keeping me in limbo. I found Emma in her crib, tiny fists waving as she cried. The moment I picked her up, she settled against my chest with complete trust. Your grandmother thinks I'm making a mistake, baby girl, I whispered, gathering her diaper bag with one hand. Maybe she's right about the practical stuff. Maybe this would all be easier if I just gave up. Emma made a soft cooing sound, her dark eyes focusing on my face with that intent newborn stare. But she's wrong about one thing. This isn't about pride. It's about teaching you that some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are terrible. Especially when the odds are terrible. I packed quickly, shoving clothes and bottles into the diaper bag while Emma watched from her carrier. 3 weeks of my life fit into 2 bags, pathetic, but also liberating. No ties to this house except the ones I was about to cut forever. Downstairs, I could hear my parents arguing in hushed, urgent tones with Jake and Rebecca. Something about family reputation and legal exposure. The words drifted up through the floorboards, but I wasn't listening anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over, Sarah. Some battles have consequences you haven't considered yet. HB. Harrison Blackwell. Texting me directly, even while facing ethics charges. I screenshot the message and forwarded it to Deputy Patterson's number. If he wanted to dig his grave deeper by threatening witnesses, I was happy to provide him with a shovel. Time to go. Time to find out what kind of mother I really was when everything else got stripped away. The text from Harrison should have terrified me, but as I carried Emma downstairs, all I felt was cold determination. My parents had taught me to fear consequences my entire life, consequences of speaking up, consequences of fighting back, consequences of refusing to be what they wanted me to be. Now they were about to learn about consequences too. Ready? Jake asked as I appeared in the living room with Emma's carrier and our hastily packed bags. More than ready. Dad made one last attempt. Sarah, please. Let's sit down tomorrow when everyone's calmer. Work this out as a family. We're not a family, Dad. Families don't hire lawyers to steal each other's children. Mom's composure cracked again. Fine. Walk away. But don't come crawling back when reality hits and you can't handle being a single mother with no resources. I won't be crawling anywhere, I said, heading for the door. But you might want to start practicing your apology, because when this all comes out in court, everyone's going to know exactly what kind of grandparents you really are. Rebecca held the door open. We'll be in touch about your testimony for the state bar hearing. And Sarah? You did the right thing. The night air felt like freedom as we loaded Emma into Jake's car. Behind us, my parents' house glowed with warm light, the picture of suburban respectability hiding something rotten at its core. Where to? Jake asked, starting the engine. Anywhere but here. As we pulled out of the driveway, my phone exploded with notifications. Text after text from my mother. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. Emma deserves better than this chaos you're creating. When you fail, and you will fail, don't expect us to clean up your mess. Then one from Dad, your mother is just scared, sweetheart. We both are. We love you and Emma so much. Please reconsider. The good cop, bad cop routine they'd perfected over 22 years. But I wasn't their victim anymore. Sarah, Jake said carefully, there's something else you need to know about Harrison's other cases. My stomach tightened. What? 3 of them involved grandparents who successfully gained custody through fabricated evidence. Those children are still living with people who essentially kidnapped them legally. He paused at a red light, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror. Your case isn't just about Emma anymore. It's about getting those other kids home too. The weight of that responsibility settled over me like a lead blanket. 6 other families. Children stolen from their parents through lies and legal manipulation. All because Harrison Blackwell had found a profitable niche in manufactured family crises. The mother in the Hoffman case, Rebecca added from the passenger seat, she killed herself last year. Couldn't live with losing her daughter to her own in-laws' lies. Emma stirred in her car seat beside me, and I touched her tiny hand. She wrapped her fingers around mine with that instinctive trust that made my chest ache. How long will the investigation take? I asked. Months, probably. Harrison's got resources and connections. He won't go down easy. Jake turned onto the highway leading away from my old life. But Sarah, what your parents don't understand is that you just became the most important witness in a federal investigation. That's not unemployable, that's someone who stood up to corruption when it mattered most. My phone rang. Mom's contact photo, the 3 of us at Christmas 2 years ago, back when I still believed they wanted what was best for me, filled the screen. I declined the call and blocked the number. Some bridges were meant to burn. The motel room Jake found for us was a far cry from my parents' pristine guest room, but as I settled Emma into the portable crib Rebecca had somehow procured at 11 p.m., it felt safer than anywhere I'd been in weeks. The walls were thin, the carpet questionable, but nobody here was plotting to steal my daughter. Sarah. Jake sat heavily in the room's single chair, looking older than I remembered. There's something else about Harrison's cases I didn't mention in front of your parents. I was changing Emma's diaper on the bed, trying to maintain some semblance of normal routine in the chaos. What now? The Hoffman case I mentioned? The mother who died? His voice dropped. She didn't just lose custody. Harrison coached the grandparents to get her declared mentally incompetent. She spent 8 months in a psychiatric facility before she got out, and by then her daughter barely remembered her. My hand stilled on Emma's onesie. You think that's what my parents were planning? Rebecca found the preliminary paperwork when she was photographing their documents tonight. Application for mental health evaluation, already filled out. They just needed tomorrow's custody hearing to go their way first. The room spun. Not just losing Emma, losing myself. Being locked away while my parents raised my daughter to believe I was too sick, too dangerous to be around. How is that even legal? Rebecca looked up from her laptop where she'd been documenting evidence all evening. It's not, when it's based on fabricated evidence. But judges see concerned family members with expensive lawyers, and they err on the side of caution. Especially when there's a documented history of depression. My college breakdown. The semester I'd spent in counseling after my panic attacks got so bad I couldn't leave my dorm room. I thought that was behind me, a private struggle I'd overcome. But my parents had been weaponizing it for weeks. There's more, Jake said grimly. I called my Tribune contact who's been tracking Harrison's cases. 3 of the families he's targeted had one specific thing in common. Which is insurance money. Inheritance. Some kind of financial benefit that went to whoever gained custody of the children. He met my eyes. Sarah, do you have any kind of trust fund? Life insurance policy? Anything your parents might gain access to through Emma? I shook my head, then stopped. Wait. My grandmother's trust. It matured when I turned 21, but I never accessed it because of the depression stuff. My parents had been managing it as trustees until I'm financially stable. The silence in the room was deafening. How much money are we talking about? Rebecca asked quietly. I don't know exactly. Grandma Rose left me her house in Evanston plus investments. My parents said it was around $200,000 2 years ago, but the house has probably appreciated. My voice trailed off as the implications hit me. If something happened to me, if I was declared incompetent, and Emma was in their custody, they'd control both the money and your daughter, Jake finished. Jesus, Sarah. This wasn't just about thinking you're unfit. This was about a $300,000 trust fund. Emma started fussing, picking up on the tension in the room. I lifted her, breathing in her sweet scent while my mind reeled. Everything, the timing of their concern, the expensive lawyer, the psychiatric evaluation papers, it all made horrible sense now. I need to call the bank tomorrow, I said. Find out exactly what's in that trust and what access my parents currently have. My phone buzzed with another blocked number. You can't hide forever, Sarah. Emma needs stability, not whatever this is. We'll be seeing you in court soon. Mom. They'd gotten a new phone. Of course they had. But this time, their message felt less like a threat and more like a confession. The morning brought coffee that tasted like burnt water and Emma's hungry cries at 5:47 a.m. As I fed her in the motel's plastic chair, watching sunrise creep through curtains that had seen better decades, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Miss Chen? This is Patricia Walsh from First National Trust Services. I understand you've requested an emergency review of the Rose Chen Memorial Trust? I'd called them at 6 a.m. when their offices opened, expecting to leave a voicemail. Yes, I need to know the current balance and trustee access permissions. I'm afraid there's been some unusual activity on your account that we flagged for investigation. Can you verify your current address for our records? My stomach dropped. What kind of unusual activity? 3 withdrawal requests in the past month, totaling $47,000. All submitted with proper trustee documentation, but the amounts were significant enough to trigger our review process. $47,000. My parents had been draining my inheritance while planning to take my daughter. Miss Chen? Are you there? I'm here. Those withdrawals weren't authorized by me. Who submitted the paperwork? Richard Chen, as co-trustee, citing emergency family medical expenses. The documentation appeared legitimate, but given your call this morning. Papers rustled in the background. I think you should come in immediately. We may need to involve our fraud investigation department. I looked down at Emma, peacefully finishing her bottle, oblivious to the fact that her grandparents had been systematically stealing her future college fund. The trust my grandmother had carefully built was being pillaged to pay for the lawyer trying to take us both. Miss Chen? There's something else. We received another withdrawal request yesterday for $85,000, but it's on hold pending this review. The justification listed was emergency custody proceedings and psychiatric care expenses. They'd planned to drain the entire trust. Pay Harrison's fees, cover the costs of having me committed, maybe even set aside money for Emma's care while they raised her. All funded by my own inheritance. I'll be there in 2 hours, I said. Jake was already awake when I knocked on his adjoining room door, phone pressed to his ear. Rebecca's at the courthouse, he said, hanging up. Harrison's filing emergency motions to get yesterday's suspension lifted. He's claiming prosecutorial misconduct and bias. He's desperate. I bounced Emma gently as she fussed. And broke, probably. My parents have been paying him with my trust fund money. Jake's eyes darkened. How much? $47,000 so far, with another $85,000 pending. The numbers felt surreal. Jake, that was Emma's future. College, maybe a house someday. They stole it to pay for kidnapping her. Not stole. Past tense implies success. He grabbed his jacket. We're getting that money back, and we're making sure Harrison never practices law again. The drive to First National took us through my old neighborhood, past Northwestern's campus where I'd first met Jake in his investigative journalism class. For years ago, I'd been a naive sophomore who thought corruption was something that happened to other people, in other families. Sarah, Jake said as we pulled into the bank's parking lot, whatever we find in there, whatever your parents have done, remember something. You're not just fighting for Emma anymore. You're fighting for every family Harrison's destroyed, every child he's helped steal, every parent he's driven to desperation. Through the bank's glass doors, I could see Patricia Walsh waiting with a manila folder thick enough to represent months of theft. Emma stirred in her carrier, tiny fist curling around my finger. Then let's go get them all back, I said. The war wasn't just personal anymore. It was about justice. And I was finally ready to win it. The meeting with Patricia Walsh lasted 3 hours and left me feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach repeatedly. The theft was even worse than I'd imagined. Your parents had been making systematic withdrawals for 8 months, Patricia explained, spreading bank statements across the conference table. It started small, $2,000 here, $3,500 there. Always with documentation citing your ongoing mental health treatment and inability to manage financial decisions. Emma dozed in her carrier beside me while I stared at line after line of unauthorized transactions. $67,000 total. Nearly a third of my grandmother's carefully saved legacy, gone. The largest single withdrawal was $15,000 on March 8, Patricia continued. The same day Harrison Blackwell's retainer agreement was signed, according to the documentation you provided. Jake leaned forward. They'd been planning this since March? Before Emma was even born? My due date had been March 15th. They'd hired Harrison a week before she arrived, while I was still living in my crappy studio apartment, struggling with the final weeks of pregnancy and believing my parents' offers of help were genuine. There's more, Patricia said grimly. The psychiatric evaluation paperwork your friend photographed? It includes a financial competency assessment. If that had gone through, your parents would have gained permanent control of the remaining trust funds as your legal guardians. Guardians? The word came out as a croak. I'm 22 years old. In Illinois, adults can be placed under guardianship if they're deemed mentally incompetent to manage their affairs. Given your documented history of depression and your current unstable living situation, a sympathetic judge might have granted it. The room felt like it was closing in. Not just Emma, they'd planned to take control of my entire life. My money, my decisions, my freedom. All while positioning themselves as the caring family members stepping up during my crisis. However, Patricia's tone shifted. The fact that these withdrawals were made under false pretenses changes everything. I've already frozen the account and initiated fraud proceedings. Every penny will be recovered. Jake was taking notes on his phone. How long will that take? 6 to 8 weeks for the full investigation, but we can release emergency funds immediately if Miss Chen needs them for housing and childcare. Emergency funds from my own stolen money. The irony was suffocating. My phone buzzed with a text from another unknown number. Bank called. Very disappointed in you, Sarah. We were protecting that money for Emma's future. Now you've made everything more complicated. Dad. They were monitoring my financial accounts. Of course they were. Patricia, I need to know something. Are there any other accounts, investments, anything else my parents might have access to? She consulted her computer screen. There's a small savings account your grandmother opened when you were 16. Balance of $3,247, but it requires dual signatures for withdrawal. Your parents tried to access it last week, but we couldn't reach you for authorization. Last week. While I was living in their house, trusting them with Emma, they were at the bank trying to drain my teenage savings account. Miss Chen? Patricia was watching my face with concern. Are you alright? I'm fine. Just processing the fact that my parents have been robbing me for 8 months while pretending to care about my well-being. Jake's phone rang. Rebecca, he answered, putting it on speaker. What's the word from the courthouse? Bad news and worse news. Rebecca's voice filled the conference room. Harrison got his suspension temporarily lifted pending a full hearing. He's claiming the recordings were obtained illegally and that Sarah has a history of paranoid episodes. My heart sank. What's the worst news? Your parents filed a new petition this morning. Emergency protective custody for Emma, claiming you've kidnapped her and are living in dangerous transient conditions with unknown individuals of questionable character. The bank conference room suddenly felt like a trap. While I was here documenting their financial crimes, they were painting me as an unfit mother who'd stolen my own child. Rebecca, how long do we have? Emergency hearing is scheduled for 2 p.m. today. Judge Martinez is presiding. She's fair, but she takes child welfare seriously. We need you back here immediately. I looked at Emma, still sleeping peacefully in her carrier, unaware that in 3 hours a judge would decide whether she belonged with me or with the people who'd spent months systematically stealing from both of us. Patricia, I need those fraud documents now. Everything you have. Of course. Miss Chen? She paused at the conference room door. For what it's worth, I've seen financial elder abuse, inheritance theft, all kinds of family fraud. But I've never seen anything this calculated. Your parents didn't just steal money, they built an entire narrative to justify taking control of your life. As we rushed toward Jake's car with Emma and a folder full of evidence, my phone exploded with notifications. Text after text from numbers I didn't recognize, all variations of the same message. Come home, Sarah. We can fix this. Don't make Emma pay for your mistakes. But they'd made one crucial error in their desperation. They'd underestimated exactly how much fight their broken daughter had left. The courthouse steps felt like climbing toward Judgment Day. Emma fussed in her carrier as we hurried through the metal detectors, picking up on my anxiety despite my attempts to stay calm. Jake carried the folder of bank documents while Rebecca briefed us on what to expect. Judge Martinez has a reputation for cutting through bullshit, but she's also seen plenty of cases where unstable parents put children at risk, Rebecca said as we found seats in the hallway outside Family Court 3B. Your parents' lawyer is going to paint a picture of a desperate young mother who's lost touch with reality. Their lawyer? I frowned. I thought Harrison was suspended. He is. They hired Patricia Vance from Morrison and Associates this morning. She specializes in emergency custody cases, and she's very good at what she does. Through the courtroom's glass doors, I could see my parents sitting at a polished conference table, both dressed in their Sunday best. Mom wore the navy suit she bought for my high school graduation, the picture of concerned respectability. Dad kept checking his watch and whispering urgently to a sharp-faced woman in an expensive blazer. Patricia Vance. The new hired gun. Sarah. Jake touched my arm. There's something else. Rebecca found out why they moved so fast with a new petition. What do you mean? Rebecca pulled out her phone, showing me a news article dated this morning. Tribune just published Jake's preliminary story about Harrison's ethics violations. Your parents are mentioned by name as clients who may have participated in fabricating evidence. The headline made my stomach lurch, prominent family attorney under investigation for custody fraud scheme. Below it, a photo of Harrison looking distinguished in his law office, and a smaller image of my parents' house with a caption, the Evanston family whose case sparked the investigation. They're in damage control mode, Jake explained. If they can get Emma into protective custody today, they can claim they were acting out of legitimate concern rather than participating in Harrison's scheme. A bailiff emerged from the courtroom. Chen custody matter, we're ready for you. My legs felt like water as I stood up, adjusting Emma's carrier with shaking hands. Everything I'd fought for, everything I'd discovered about my parents' betrayal, came down to the next hour in front of a judge who didn't know me from any other struggling young mother. Remember, Rebecca whispered as we walked toward the courtroom doors, you're not the same person you were 3 weeks ago. You're not even the same person you were yesterday. Show her the mother you become. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, more like a conference room with wood paneling and fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly sick. Judge Martinez sat behind an imposing desk, a woman in her 50s with graying hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. Good afternoon, she said as we took our seats. I've reviewed the emergency petition filed by Mr. and Mrs. Chen regarding their granddaughter, Emma Chen Morrison. I understand there are some unusual circumstances surrounding this case. Patricia Vance stood smoothly. Your Honor, we're here because my clients are genuinely concerned about their daughter's mental state and their granddaughter's welfare. Ms. Chen has exhibited increasingly paranoid behavior, including making unfounded accusations against family members and removing the child from a stable home environment to live in transient housing with virtual strangers. Every word was carefully chosen, technically accurate but twisted into something ugly. I had accused them of plotting against me, because they were. I had taken Emma to live with Jake, because staying with them wasn't safe. Miss Chen, Judge Martinez addressed me directly. I understand you have some concerns about your parents' motivations in this matter. I stood on unsteady legs, Emma's carrier balanced in my arms. Your Honor, 3 days ago I discovered that my parents have been working with an attorney to fabricate evidence for a custody case. They've also stolen over $67,000 from my inheritance to pay legal fees for taking my daughter away from me. Patricia Vance's objection was swift. Your Honor, these are exactly the kind of paranoid delusions that concern my clients. Miss Chen has no evidence of any financial impropriety. Actually, we do. Rebecca stood, holding up the folder from First National. Bank records showing systematic unauthorized withdrawals, documented fraud, and a frozen account pending criminal investigation. Judge Martinez frowned. Mrs. Vance, were you aware of these financial allegations when you filed this emergency petition? For the first time, Patricia Vance hesitated. Your Honor, any financial matters are separate from our concerns about child welfare. Are they? The judge's tone sharpened. Because from where I sit, it looks like we might have a case where the people claiming to protect this child have been systematically stealing from her trust fund. Emma chose that moment to start crying, her wails echoing through the small courtroom. As I lifted her from the carrier to comfort her, I caught my mother's expression across the room. For just a second, her mask slipped completely. Instead of concern or love, I saw cold calculation. Frustration that her carefully laid plans were unraveling in front of a judge who was asking the right questions. That look told me everything I needed to know about who my parents really were. And more importantly, it told Judge Martinez everything she needed to know too. Judge Martinez called for a 15-minute recess after Emma's crying disrupted Patricia Vance's attempt to redirect focus back to my unstable behavior. As the courtroom cleared, I found myself alone with my daughter in the hallway, watching my parents huddle with their new lawyer through the glass doors. Rebecca appeared beside me with 2 cups of coffee and a grim expression. We have a problem. What now? I just got off the phone with the Tribune's legal department. Harrison's filed an injunction to stop Jake's article from running in tomorrow's print edition. He's claiming it will taint the jury pool for his ethics hearing. My heart sank. Can he do that? Temporarily, yes. Which means the public pressure that was working in our favor just disappeared. She sipped her coffee, thinking. There's something else. Patricia Vance is good, but she's not taking this case for free. Your parents hired her this morning, which means they found money somewhere. I thought about the frozen trust account, the documented theft, the emergency funds Patricia Walsh had offered. They can't access my inheritance anymore. The bank froze everything. Then where did they get $20,000 for a new lawyer? The question hung in the air as the bailiff called us back into the courtroom. Judge Martinez looked like she'd spent the recess reviewing documents, and her expression wasn't encouraging. Before we continue, she said, I want to address the financial allegations that were raised. Mrs. Vance, your clients are accused of withdrawing funds from their daughter's trust without proper authorization. Patricia Vance stood with the kind of confidence that came from finding solid ground. Your Honor, my clients have documented power of attorney for financial decisions regarding Miss Chen's inheritance. These powers were granted 2 years ago when she was receiving treatment for severe depression and deemed unable to manage her own affairs. The words hit me like a physical blow. Power of attorney. I'd been so focused on the trust fund theft that I'd forgotten about the papers I'd signed during my worst semester in college, when the panic attacks were so bad I couldn't even go to the bank. Your Honor, Rebecca interjected, we weren't aware of any power of attorney arrangement. Judge Martinez consulted her notes. Mrs. Vance, do you have documentation of this arrangement? We do. Patricia produced a folder I hadn't seen before. Signed October 15, 2019, witnessed by Dr. Margaret Foster at Northwestern University Counseling Services. The arrangement was intended to be temporary, but Miss Chen never formally revoked it. Because I'd forgotten it existed. Because my parents had never mentioned using it. Because I trusted them to tell me when they were making financial decisions on my behalf. The withdrawals in question, Patricia continued, were made under legal authority granted by Miss Chen herself during a period when she acknowledged being unable to manage her financial responsibilities. Emma fussed in my arms, and I realized my hands were shaking. Everything I'd built my case on, the theft, the fraud, the criminal behavior, suddenly had legal justification. My parents hadn't stolen from me. They'd used powers I'd given them myself. Miss Chen, Judge Martinez said gently, were you aware your parents had this financial authority? Yes, Your Honor. But I signed those papers 3 years ago, when I was barely 19 and having panic attacks. I never intended for them to use it to fund legal action against me. Nevertheless, the authority exists until formally revoked. The judge's tone was becoming more skeptical. Mrs. Vance, what other concerns do your clients have about their daughter's current situation? Patricia smiled, sensing victory. Your Honor, Miss Chen removed her infant daughter from a stable home environment in the middle of the night, taking the child to a motel room with individuals her parents had never met. She's unemployed, has no permanent address, and is now making serious accusations against family members who have been supporting her financially and emotionally since the child's birth. When she put it that way, I sounded exactly like the unstable young mother they'd been painting me as from the beginning. Judge Martinez looked at me with something that might have been pity. Miss Chen, I understand family relationships can be complicated, but I have to consider what's in Emma's best interests. Can you provide proof of stable housing and income? I opened my mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The truth was, I had neither. Your Honor, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. 3 days ago I couldn't answer that question. But I can now. I reached into the diaper bag and pulled out a folder Jake had helped me prepare during the recess. I have a signed offer letter from Morrison Marketing Group, starting Monday at $42,000 annually. I have approved application for a 2-bedroom apartment in Rogers Park with first month's rent paid from my emergency trust funds. And I have something else. Judge Martinez raised an eyebrow. Which is? Proof that my parents never intended to give Emma back, regardless of how stable I became. I handed Rebecca my phone. Play the recording from 3 nights ago. My mother's voice filled the courtroom, crystal clear through the phone speakers. Some people just aren't meant to be parents, Richard. We're saving that precious baby from a lifetime of instability. Patricia Vance shot to her feet. Your Honor, that recording was obtained without consent. In Illinois, only one party needs to consent to record a conversation, Rebecca interrupted smoothly. Sarah was a participant in that conversation, even if she was listening from the hallway of her parents' home. The recording continued, laying out their entire plan. The fabricated evidence. The CPS call that became a custody petition. Harrison's coaching sessions. By the time my father's voice acknowledged the scheduled timeline, my mother had gone pale. Judge Martinez held up her hand for silence. Mrs. Vance, I'm having trouble reconciling your client's stated concern for their granddaughter with what I'm hearing on this recording. Your Honor, parents often express frustration privately when they're worried about a child's welfare. Do they hire attorneys to fabricate evidence? I interrupted, surprising myself with my boldness. Because that's what Harrison Blackwell was doing. That's why he's under investigation. That's why the state bar suspended his license yesterday. Patricia looked genuinely confused. Your Honor, Mr. Blackwell assured us that suspension was temporary. It became permanent 2 hours ago, Judge Martinez said, consulting something on her computer. I just received notification from the Illinois State Bar. Mr. Blackwell's license has been permanently revoked following an emergency hearing this morning. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. I watched my parents' faces as the reality hit them. Harrison was gone. Their months of planning, their stolen money, their carefully constructed case, all of it had been built on the lies of a man who just lost everything. Furthermore, Judge Martinez continued, I've been reviewing the initial custody petition filed yesterday. Several of the claims made appear to directly contradict the evidence Miss Chen has presented today. She fixed my parents with a stern look. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, did you knowingly provide false information in your emergency filing? Dad started to speak, but Mom grabbed his arm, whispering urgently. Patricia Vance looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Your Honor, I said quietly, I don't want my parents arrested. I just want them to stay away from my daughter and me. Permanently. Judge Martinez nodded slowly. Miss Chen, based on the evidence presented today, your employment offer, housing arrangement, and the concerning nature of the recordings, I'm dismissing the emergency custody petition. Furthermore, I'm issuing a restraining order prohibiting Mr. and Mrs. Chen from contacting you or Emma for a period of 1 year. Emma stood in my arms as the judge's gavel came down, sealing our freedom. I had one. We had one. My parents thought they could steal my baby from me, but they'd forgotten something important. I wasn't the broken girl they'd raised anymore. I was Emma's mother. And that made me stronger than they ever imagined.